How could you tell if your inputs were overloading? If you had one.
Well, I used a mixer.
Uh-huh.
When we did this session, I think I used a Bogan amplifier, a mixer setup. We mic'd, what do we do? I put the drums in a news booth. See, even then, we knew enough that everything was bleeding. And when you're doing a live session, you only had one chance to capture this thing.
Right.
So, as you did it again and again, and the guys get tired and all this bullshit, you kept the best takes you could, and we used to stack them. We'd say, okay, that sounded good, we'll keep that, and then we'd bring it back later. I had two tape decks.
Would you pull it off the reel? If you had a good take, would you like cut it right then?
We would take it, yeah, we would take it and set it off, and then. Now keep in mind, this is such early recording technique.
Right.
That we were going by guess and by golly in a lot of ways, knowing the limitations of what we had in the way of equipment. At the same time, a very, very good friend of mine, who remains a very good friend to this day, Don Grashy, he's in the Canadian Hall of Fame, Music Hall of Fame now, as a founder, a discoverer, and all this bullshit. But he was brilliant when it came to studio design, and we had some very, very interesting things. This is why we ended up with these big Telefunken microphones back in those days. For a radio station,
that's phenomenal.
Should have never had.
Right, exactly.
No way.
No way.
Not in God's creation. Like
yeah,
these things
absolutely true.
These things were $1,400 back then.
Right.
And I remember I'd have to. And we did that session.
Now.
When you hear Neil's voice, you'll certainly tell they were done on Telefunken mics. I remember I used to have to go in, fire up the preamps. Fire up the preamps and get everything going because every one of these mics had a tube in it.
Right, exactly.
And it was just amazing.
For that beautiful sound.
Well, this is like I say, we put him in a studio, and because these mics were omnidirectional, it was very difficult to separate him and the band. And so when you hear this music, the one I produced, in fact, the One I Wonder, you'll hear him, he's very high on the track and the music's buried. Because the vocal was the most important thing to us back then, and that was the technique, not the band.
Right, that's true.
Because the radio stations were so bad, AM was so bad in those days, that unless you could hear the vocal, so to make it sound good, you had to have him...
A lot of vocal.
A lot of vocal. But the basement tapes, you'll hear the difference where he's pushed more into the track, which became a later technique down the road. But...
were you using... any compressing, limiting,
no.
EQ or reverb on
I used reverb, but it was natural reverb then. It was just electronic reverb. We didn't have
tape delay. Did you use any of that, or just the double tracking on the?
It was a double tracking, but it was a bit of tape delay, and that's basically what we used. That was the only thing that you could use for reverb in those days because systems hadn't been invented. We had the best tape we could get. Some of this is just like I say, it's recycled tape, but it's. It only had maybe one or two generations at the time. So.